Hi everyone, Jill Reagan here. Welcome back to Whispering Willow Farm. I'm at my tunnel today and I'm going to be talking about a topic that we get asked about the most this time of year in our comments here on our channel, and that is what you can grow during fall. So today's video is going to be a fall planting guide, what you can grow based off of your zone. And so this is always kind of the follow-up question, right? Or the statement that we hear a lot on our channel is, well, I live in this zone, so I can't actually grow year-round. And so I just wanted to kind of break this down. So we are in Central Arkansas, Zone 7B. We have a very, very mild climate. And so we are really fortunate that we can crank out a ton of food year-round. You guys can see here, I even have, cucumbers and tomatoes, which are summer crops that I'm able to grow in my high tunnel. And so we do have a little bit of advantages. We are also using hoops. Right now we have insect netting, but we will trade off that insect netting for row covers as the temperatures begin to drop to just really kind of create an atmosphere where we can grow food longer in the season. And so I wanted to talk about this because I do believe that in most zones you are going to be able to crank out food. You might just have to add a little bit of insulation or maybe think outside of the box if that's something that is really important to you. Before we dive into today's topic, some things that are really important to know if you are wanting to implement fall and winter gardening is knowing your U.S. hardiness zone. This is really easy to determine if you do not know it. Just a quick Google search. Usually I send people to the Farmer's Almanac. You can type in your zip code. It's going to tell you your hardiness zone, and it's also going to tell you your estimated first and last frost, which if you are a beginner gardener and you found yourself on this video, that is crucial. You should know that first and last frost just ingrained in your brain because it's going to be really, really important to the success of your gardening. If you also want to dive into winter gardening more, I did an entire webinar. I turned it into a digital resource. It's $5. You can grab it down below in the description, but it's going to go over just how plants grow differently, things to consider, succession planting, all sorts of things that you need to know when it comes to winter gardening. So if you're interested in that, you can find it in the description below. All right, let's dive in. I hope you guys have your pen, notebook, iPad, phone, whatever. I've actually got my computer out here because I took a lot of detailed notes for this. But really the gist is if you want to grow food or you're already growing food in the spring and the summer, you want to be able to carry that out, right? You don't want to be self-sufficient during certain parts of the year and have to be super reliant. I know in our area, winter farmers markets are not a thing here. So if I do not grow my own food throughout the winter, I am then put in a situation where I have to go buy it from a grocery store, which is really not ideal. So even if you're just able to implement a few different things for your family to where you're not having to go to the grocery store and buying them, I do think that that's super, super important. And so you're not going to be able to grow everything. I do like to tell people grow within the appropriate season. I am able to crank out summer things as we're transitioning into fall, but I'm also growing in a high tunnel where I can control those temperatures a bit more. If you are growing outside of protected culture, grow those things that are going to thrive, that can even handle a light frost, that even get sweeter with the frost. So really just kind of know on the forefront, set yourself up for success. And how you do that is growing the appropriate varieties within the appropriate seasons. And I think that's going to be a really good starting point. So first up, we're going to be talking about zones 3 and 4. There are a few things you can grow. First, I want to talk about the flowers. There's a lot of fall bulbs you can put in the ground. Granted, this isn't food, but if you're still looking for something to bloom early in the spring, things like your tulips and daffodils, narcissus, those are going to be really great to go ahead and get a fall planting in. And for me, I love planting bulbs. We don't actually sell those bulbs, but it kind of signifies spring is here. So when I see that first daffodil bloom and I see that first tulip pop out of the ground, it's kind of just a signifying thing for me. Spring is here and we better get ready. And so those are just some fall bulbs you can do, but garlic is one of those things you can plant in the fall. You don't actually harvest until the next summer. But it's one of those things that's great. You can get the cloves in the ground now. You can heavy mulch throughout the winter. They do great even if you have heavy, heavy snowfall. I've even planted garlic as late as January with snow on the ground, which is not ideal at all, but I did still reap a harvest from that. So I hope that that encourages you, even if you're in a really cold zone, you can still plant garlic right now in the fall and harvest it in the summer. Some other things you can grow in zone 3 or 4, those are going to be those those spinaches. Spinach will germinate in super, super low temperatures. They can withstand frost, those winter lettuce varieties, and you could easily put some sort of row cover on them and insulate them a bit, but you will be able to crank out so many different lettuce and green varieties, which will be really nice when you go into, baking for the holiday, having a fresh salad you can get outside. If you have some sort of cold frame, you can grow these things under your cold frame. You can even crank out some of these things inside if you have some sort of grow light setup. So there's a lot of versatility when it comes to spinach, lettuce, baby greens. Again, when you are shopping these varieties online, look for the ones that are winter hardy. There are specific spinaches that do better in the cold versus what do better grown in the summertime. So really your kind of sweet spot here is diving in and doing the appropriate research to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. All right, now let's transition into zone 5 and 6. Again, those spring bulbs, you're going to be able to get those in the ground. The important thing with that is just making sure they have a root system established before it gets super, super cold and your frost sets in. Granted, there are so many more things that I'm sure I'm leaving off of the list. This is just an idea if you're thinking, man, I can't grow anything during the fall and winter. I wanted to give you a few things in hopes that it would spark your curiosity to dive deeper, do some research, and figure out what it is that you can actually grow within your zone. So this is just kind of an overarching view, and my hope is that you'll dive a little deeper based off of what your zone is. But 5 and 6, you got those spring bulbs. Again, you can plant that garlic, the shallots. Those are great because those can be storage. And so you can, right now, if you're not utilizing a lot of your outdoor bed space, you can plant a ton of this, enough to last you for an entire year. Granted, you're not going to be harvesting these until the summer, so be mindful that you're not going to have that bed space until late summer. But for me, we like to really crank out the onions and the garlics that we grow to last us until we're growing again next year. And it's great because those things store really great and they're really, really low maintenance. So if you're not wanting to leave a bed empty, maybe you don't have a plan for the summer, go ahead and plant that with onions, garlics, and leeks, because trust me, shallots, those things, more than likely you're cooking with them and having to source them out anyways. So you'll be able to grow those spinach, leafy greens. There's even some perennial herbs like sage and thyme. And so there are still quite a few varieties if you're in that 5 and 6 zone that you can definitely crank out as well. So now we transition into zone 7 and 8, which happens to be my zone here in Arkansas. And again, we're pretty mild, so we can really push the limit. We can do those daffodils and tulips. We can also do irises and hyanthus. There's so many different fall bulbs we can get in the ground here. But then we are, just have a lot more availability on what we can grow outside as well. As far as those root vegetables, you've got rutabagas, turnips, radish, parsnips, beets, carrots, all those things. None of that's off limits. And so I've got a ton of this stuff planted in my tunnel and also outside as well. We've got all of our leafy greens. I've got all my brassicas, so broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, celery, really whatever you can think of, kohlrabi, anything in that brassica family I am growing, which even if I did not grow it here in my greenhouse, which is adding a little bit of protection, before we grew in tunnels, I grew all of these things outside as well, and I just added row cover, and they did really great. The most important thing is that if you are starting from seed, that they're big enough to establish root before it gets super, super cold. And if you don't think you're going to make that window, go source out these plants that are a little bit ahead. Usually my Brussels sprouts I source out. It takes a really long time for those to get big and mature because I want to make sure that I have really healthy plants with good established root systems before it starts getting super, super cold. But if you are in that 7 and 8 zone, there are a lot of things that you can be growing either from seed, direct seeding, or from transplants. Now we move into zone 9 and 10, which is super tropical. The weather's very, very mild. Winters aren't really a thing, you guys know. So there is a lot of options you can do there. Of course, all your broccoli, cauliflower, you could still be doing peas, beans. You might even still be able to get some cucumbers cucumbers and things like that that are, if you're growing a hybrid variety, fast turnaround. And then citrus, you can grow a ton of different citrus things. Those are going to be just fine in your zone. So again, if you've noticed, zone is kind of something I keep hammering on and mentioning, because you need to know your zone. You need to know those frost dates, because that's really going to determine how you can push the limit. Granted, if you are growing in a high tunnel, you're going to have so many more resources available as far as things that you can grow longer in the season, like my tomatoes and my cucumbers. You're not seeing a lot of gardeners in my area growing these things out in the field, but I'm able to still crank out a harvest because I can insulate and kind of control the environments in my high tunnel a little better. But some things to be mindful of if you are growing during the fall. You want to make sure that you're mulching really well to where that it's retaining water really well. And so I find that that's crucial. You're not having to water as often as we get into the colder temperatures, but you can deep water, whether with drip irrigation or even if you're just watering with a hose. Make sure you're watering at the base of your plant. That way it's really soaking it up. When you think about the roots being the life of that plant, you really want to nurture that. And I like to just go ahead and mulch, especially if I'm outside, to just retain that water really well. I like to go ahead and add hoops in place, whether you're using a PVC pipe or 9-gauge wire like we have here, because I want everything to be in place. That way, if we do have a sudden drop in temperatures, because I don't know about you guys, but here in Arkansas, our weather's a little wonky, so it can call for, you know, a mild day and the temperature drops. You really just never know. I do like to go ahead and have my things in place. That way, if a frost sneaks up on us, all we have to do is just literally lay the row cover. But there are so many options, and I hope this quick little video, like I mentioned, I barely hit the tip of what is available, but I hope that if you were wanting to plant a fall garden and you think maybe I just can't grow food, I listed a few things that you can actually grow in your zone, and it encourages you. And if you're not in a season to grow right now, use this time to just research what you can do and prepare for next fall as you're transitioning out of that summer garden. But if you guys have any questions about what you can grow or your zone specifically, make sure you leave a comment down below and I'll be sure to get to them. But thank you for hanging out with us. I'll talk to you soon.